This is the old Charleston Jail, built in 1802 and still standing on Magazine Street. I want to tell you about one of the ghosts that are in this story of this jail. To know the story of Lavinia Fisher. And my friend Spooks here wanted to know also, so I'm going to read him the story of Lavinia and John Fisher. John and Lavinia Fisher were characters in early Charleston around 1819. John was described as a low-life sort of person, so you know what that means. He was sort of a bum. His wife, however, Lavinia, was a pretty young woman until she opened her mouth, and then she could curse like a sailor. John really loved Lavinia, though, and there were a group of vigilantes that went up to 5 Mile House and then 6 Mile House because there had been stories of wagons being hijacked during their trip down to Charleston, on the highway into Charleston. And that was disrupting the economy of the area. So they went up, they surrounded 5 Mile House. When the gang inside didn't give in, they burned the house down. Then they went up to 6 Mile House, and there the gang came out peacefully, and the bandits were then told to leave. So they left a man by the name of Ross to be a caretaker for the house and make sure it didn't happen again. But the gang again returned, and 2 men pulled a pistol on Ross and told him to get out or they would kill him. So Ross had to run for his life, but before he did that, he sort of appealed to Lavinia, who was standing in the room. Lavinia grabbed him by the throat, tried to choke him, and then pushed his head right through a pane of glass. He was cut on the head and on the neck, and he ran out bleeding and ran away. He then went and spoke to the authorities in Charleston. And then, about that time, shortly after Ross left, a man by the name of Peoples was a trader from Georgia, and he wanted to stop and feed his horses and give them water before he went back to Georgia. Well, a man accosted him in the area, and Mr. Peoples decided to leave. But before he could get out of there, 2 men jumped in his wagon and stole $40 from him. Wow. Well, both Peoples and Ross went to the authorities, and they took off and forced the inhabitants of 6 Mile House to surrender, because they had them surrounded and they were going to burn down the house. And John and Lavinia were placed in this jail on the 3rd floor out there. And they awaited trial. They were arraigned on the charge of highway robbery, which is serious crime in that day. So then they appealed, and by appealing, they were appealing to a higher court, and so the trial was delayed a month. But at the end of 8 months. So at the end of that time, they were tried, and they were both found guilty, which were hanging offenses. So in 1820, John and Lavinia were taken to the gallows. But before that, because they had so much time in this jail, they tried to escape. And they fashioned a rope out of blankets that they were using to sleep on. And two men, John and another inmate, got down, but then the rope broke when the second man went down, and Lavinia was left stranded up on the 3rd floor. John really loved Lavinia, and he didn't want to leave town without her, so he tried to do some robberies and get enough money to bribe an official in the jail here, but he was caught. And alert citizens saw him. They were put back in jail. And this time, there was no escape for them. So in 1820, they were put in a carriage and taken out to the city limits where the gallows were set up. And they were both hanged. But before they were hanged, John was very remorseful, and he apologized for the things that he had done. Lavinia, however, was a different story. She shrieked and hollered, and she said, if anybody wants to get a message to hell, give it to me, because I'll take it. So both of them met their demise there on at the gallows. So the story about Lavinia doesn't end there, though. Just before they left to be executed, there was a tradition to put a white gown over the condemned prisoners. And so she and John had a white gown over their clothes. And it's said now that Lavinia comes back here to haunt this house, this jail. And my advice to you is don't spend any time around this jail at night, especially when Lavinia's here. She hadn't hurt anybody so far, but I don't want you to be the first. Happy Halloween.